Nobody's ever gonna take your place. Yeah, I think we should meet in the middle. I follow you cause you're the light of the day. I need you like you need me, it's so simple. It's so simple.
Welcome back to the Gen X Juggler podcast. I'm so glad you're here. As always, this podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice in any field, including legal, medical, financial, or mental health. Please consult a qualified professional for advice tailored specifically to you. The views expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host and/or producers. Well, jugglers, here we are at episode 20 of the Gen X Juggler podcast, which is the final episode in season 1. I am so thrilled that you've been with me on this ride. I'm excited that you came on board and made it even more fun. In this episode, I want to say thank you to all of the wonderful guests who came on and brought their wisdom, their insight, their advice, and their stories of triumph as we all navigate the many, many facets of midlife together. Look for more to come next season, and for now, enjoy this Gen X Juggler Season 1 remix. In episode 2, we were joined by my cousin Crystal, who shared with us her journey through addiction, recovery, facing the consequences of her past, and living the life she always wanted today.
Did you ever get discouraged?
Oh,
like
yeah,
that?
yeah. And I played the victim on that because I would watch my friends, they would have court dates and they were like, the judge dismissed all the charges because I'm doing so well. And I was like, God, why can't they do that with me? Why are they making me go back and do this when I've done so good? And I prayed about it and I prayed about it and I bargained with God, and I finally accepted the fact that this was going to happen. So I thought, okay, then God, just be with me through it because I don't have the strength to do this on my own. So I went and turned myself in, but it was kind of funny because when I was in Travis County, they only have 10 days to pick you up. And they said, well, we don't know if they're coming. And if they don't, then we're going to let you out. And I was like, okay, so then I don't have a warrant. And they were like, no, you still have a warrant, but we can't hold you any longer than that. And
Wow.
I called Clay and I was crying and I said, look, I had the courage to turn myself in once, but I don't have the courage to do it again. I was like, we're going to have to move to Costa Rica. Something's going to happen. I'm going to go on the run because I'm here. And if they let me out, I'm not coming back on my own.
Heck yeah. I'm with you
By
on
the
that.
grace of God, on day 10, they showed up, and I was like, you better be glad because I was going to bolt. The looks on their faces when I showed up, I was like, I'm here to turn myself in. And it was like they all looked at each other like, we've never had this happen. What do we do? She's here voluntarily. And then he said, I can't find the warrant. And I was like, okay, good. Maybe they dropped it. No, he eventually found it. But I was like, the nerves and the stress of doing that, I knew I couldn't do it again. I knew I couldn't do it again. Then I think I went in July, the middle of July, they sent me to Gatesville State Jail. They sent me there, and I didn't get out until October. I want to say it was around like the 28th of October. But yeah, it was horrible. I don't 10 out of 10 do not recommend going to prison. That was a terrible time. But God got me through it. I didn't have any major problems. I pretty much got along with everybody there. Everybody there was pretty much in jail for drugs in some way, shape, or form. Some people were there that had planned on going right back out and doing the same things again. But then there was a few that wanted to change and didn't want that lifestyle anymore. And those were kind of the people that I tried to connect with. And because I had already been through it, I had already been sober for over a year. So I was kind of glad that I got a chance to talk to some of these women and let them know that, life after this doesn't have to be what it was. I got through it, I got out and put that all behind me. That's a big part of recovery is you got to make your amends, you got to deal with your stuff, everything that you caused and the harm that you did, you've got to deal with it before you can move forward. And it may take you years to do that. There's still things that pop up that I'm like, you know what? I should make an amends for that because I totally forgot about that. So that was a big, big step. And I'm as terrible as it was, I'm so thankful
Yeah.
for it.
That's
But
awesome. It's awesome that you can see it as a positive and see it as
mhm,
part of your steps of making amends for the past.
yep. Oh, I prayed, Debbie. It was probably a year's worth of prayers to for God to not let me go back. Please don't make me do this. Please, God, don't make me do this. And when I realized that this was pretty much inevitable, it
Mm.
my prayers changed to, okay, God, get me through it because
Mm.
I can't do this. And he
Yeah,
did. He did.
that's awesome.
I got back home. I was homeless, didn't have anywhere to go. I called my old boss. She said, "Well, let me make some phone calls and I'll call you back." And it was probably a week or so, maybe 2. I knew
Yeah,
I wasn't going to be able to stay in the house with Clay at the men's house, and you can't do that.
yeah.
And she called me back and she said, "We want you to come back. You won't be in the same position that you were in, but you can come back and it'll be the same pay." And she was like, "So what do you have going on right now?" And I said, "Well, right now I'm trying to find somewhere to live." And she is single, and she said, "I have a spare bedroom. If you want to live with me," she said, "that would be fine. You can live with me until you get on your feet." It was totally God because everything just kind of fell back into place. It was like, okay, you've done what I asked you to do, and now, here's where you're going to go from here. And it was like God led all of
Mhm.
it, and things just kind of fell like dominoes, just like they were supposed to. It was crazy. For couples to get clean and stay clean together is extremely rare. But the one piece of advice that I would give is do it on your own. Don't worry about what the other person is doing. You focus on you and do what you need to do and be apart from each other because
Mhm.
addiction is not the problem is not the alcohol and the drugs. That's the solution for us.
Mhm.
It's a deeper spiritual thing that you're going through that you need to deal with. The drugs and the alcohol just cover it up and makes you feel
Wow.
normal. So it's not the drugs that are the problem, it's you that is the problem. And you have to deal with that before you can deal with anything else. But the
Mhm.
cause is something deeper and it's different for everybody. And but there is a way out. You don't have to live that way. If you're willing to, you know, take advice and do what other people suggest that have been through it and know what they're talking about. I mean, I remember there's days that I prayed for the willingness to be willing to learn. You think you're on the right track, you think you know everything and you don't. And I don't care if you have 60 days or 60 years, you still don't know everything.
Mm.
You know a lot more at 60 years, but you just have to be willing.
My friend Debbie joined us in episode 4, and our conversation moved into the area of keeping up with everything that we juggle in midlife and the temptation to compare ourselves to others as we do the best we can and wonder if it's ever enough.
When I'm trying to compare myself to these really good homeschool moms or these people who have a very successful home business or these people who are always available for their parents or in-laws or seem to have a perfect relationship with the Lord, all of those things, and where I just feel like I'm just skating along, if I'm able to remember to remind my kid to brush his teeth, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, that's a really, really good day. That's like
Yeah.
I am on top of things. But most of the time, it does feel like I just got enough done, or I'm just good enough at this that I can pass. But it's not, I'm not going to be exceeding expectations on any of these check boxes. So,
I think probably even those people that we look at that we think, oh, I'll never be her. She's got it all together. We don't see, she's probably having the same exact thoughts that we do.
yes,
And
absolutely. And And I have to remind myself of that often.
Yeah.
And I want to come across as being all put together, you know?
Oh, don't we
And
all? Yeah.
and so I'm sure that they're kind of living the same way, right? That they're like, "Oh, yeah, she's got it all together."
Yeah.
Where I feel like in situations where I'm more willing to be honest about my struggles, people can relate to me a whole lot more.
When you take the responsibility of looking like you've got it all together or presenting a certain way off of your shoulders, it really does lighten the load. This is my real life and you're welcome in it. Just come on in and let's enjoy each other's company and not feel like I have to run around the house when the doorbell rings before I answer it, making things
Yeah.
perfect.
I had a friend who had, I think she had a sign on her door or something that said, if you're here to see me, come on in. If you're here to see my house, you're not welcome.
Oh, yeah.
When you have people coming over, they're not there to judge I would hope. They're not there to
Yeah.
judge, the cobwebs that are in the corner or the
Right.
shelves that haven't been dusted in a few months or, the
Right.
laundry basket that's sitting there with who knows how many clothes.
Right. I know. The school
Yeah,
books just laying around that were just
yeah.
used.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
a dining table that hasn't been used for dinner in months.
Been been used for work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been used for work or craft projects or school, but
Oh,
dinner?
yeah.
No. That happens in the
Oh,
den
yeah.
in front of the TV.
Yeah, that's why it's called the den because it's for dinner.
That's right. I am so using that.
So I think what we can definitely all agree on is none of us have it all together, and we all need to rely on each other, and we all have parts of life that still need to be worked out.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think one of my biggest struggles right now is us having our own business and, um, that we
Mm.
are really in a place where we have to rely on the Lord for our provision, which is where we all should be, but it's just so much more apparent when we are in the midst of the struggle, right? Our struggles make us better people, better human beings, right? I think that if we
Yes.
were all had an easy life, um, that we would not be as grateful for our Savior, that we would not be as grateful for one another to walk through life with. Um,
It's one of those things that we strive for, and we may never completely perfectly get there to be grateful for our struggles, but the truth is we find out who we are and who God is in the midst of our struggles, and that carries us through to every part of life
yeah,
and makes it better.
absolutely. Mhm. Yeah, and we can look back later and be so grateful for what God's brought us through.
For our listeners who are struggling with comparison, struggling with having so much on their plate that sometimes they feel like they're doing a whole lot of stuff and not doing it well,
Mhm.
just know that you're doing it just as well as the rest of us. We're all in it together, and you're doing just fine.
That's right, for sure, and know that you're a rock star.
You are a rock star.
Amen, sister.
In episode 6, my friend Rayanne joined us to talk about something that many of us face as we get older and our parents get older. How do we approach taking care of our parents who've always taken care of us? She had some really good stuff to say on the topic.
You think this, you know, this is going to happen if your parents live to be older, but you're never prepared for it, and certainly they are not prepared for it. So man, I learned a lot about patience with her and with him. I learned that I need to handle things with a much softer approach than I tend to do. I'm great if you have an emergency, I'm the one that you want to call because I can handle it, but I'm going to handle it. When it's your mama and your dad, it
Mhm.
is it's scary. And so the that I guess that's really what shocked me was the emotion that was just welling up in me, and all every emotion, was just coming out. And
Yes.
I handled it, but I don't think that I handled it as best I could. So, but I learned. I learned.
But the important thing is you handled it, and it worked out well, ultimately. She needed you in that moment, but it's so hard for our parents. We talk about our role reversal, how all of a sudden we were taken care of, and now we are the ones taking care of them, and it does happen so fast. But also, it's a role reversal for them too, because
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know better than my kid. I always know better than my kid. I'm the mom, and that makes total sense. But then kid is scared and runs in guns a-blazing to try to help. Yeah, I totally understand that.
In my professional life and in my personal relationships, I always have tried to think about the other person's feelings, but I don't know, this is horrible to say, but it doesn't come naturally to think about your parents' feelings in that situation for them. And I don't mean that in a terrible way. I'm not a hard-hearted person, but all I was thinking about was, making sure that they were had their medical attention. I wasn't thinking about how they were being impacted at the time.
That's totally understandable. It's like when we're little kids, if we're choking, our parents will yank us up by the first limb they can grab, and they'll worry about how that felt or how scary that was later. They're gonna save us. And I think
Right.
that's the same attitude that we have.
It was. In fact, I remember saying to mom when she was sitting in her chair digging her heels in, not going to the hospital, and then I said, "Look, you can get happy in the same pants you got mad in, but you're going to the hospital." She just looked at me. And so I'm sure that that was like, "Well, I'll show you. I'll just be real hard." But you're right. I mean, they're used to caring for us. We're not used to caring for them. We're used to loving them, and we're used
Yes.
to listening to them.
Yep.
And so when you are put in a position where you're making the decision for that person who's 24 years older than you are, um, it feels very foreign. I'm making decisions and I'm asking you to do things you don't want to do out of love and fear.
Yes, that's exactly right. Fear over someone you love is it's just multiplied.
When I get afraid, which is not very often, but when it comes to my mama, I can be a stinker about her, but nobody else better, and there isn't anybody better to take care of her than me, you know?
Yes, I totally understand that feeling, and yeah, that's that fierce love. What would you say is the most important or are the most important steps to take before we get to this point?
I think there's 2 very, very simple things. First is, use this podcast, this episode as the catalyst, as saying, "Hey, mom, dad, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and these ladies were talking about, what they've gone through, when their family members had these emergencies and how that kind of unfolded," and say, "I was listening to this. What do you think? What do you want to do? Do you have documentation? What hospital do you want to go to?" This hopefully would open up a conversation where you're talking about what their wishes are, but you're also finding out, if you don't already know, do they have wills? Do they have power of attorneys? I have found that a living trust is really a really good way to go. In fact, I went on to, I think it's rocketlawyer.com, and got a pretty inexpensive deal where I'm doing these documents for her. But that's starting that conversation. I know this isn't comfortable for you to talk about, mom and dad, but what are your wishes? What hospitals do you like to go? You may not even have that. You may not even, they may be super healthy, so you've never had to cross that bridge. And from that conversation, then you can talk about, well, do we need to have powers of attorney? Do you have a will? Who do you want to take care of your pets if you have to go to the hospital and maybe rehab for a while? I mean, there's so many moving parts to that whole thing. While she was in the hospital the first time, I called our banker, and we have the same banker, and said, "I don't want to just be a signer. You can be a payable upon death, which is fine, but who's going to pay the bills if your loved one is in a coma, or they just can't do it?" Um, you need to not be just a a signer on the account, you need to be an owner of the account, because an owner of the account can conduct all business. But here's the catch: that representative from the bank has to go to your parent and they have to say, "Do you want this?" And if they say no, you're not going anywhere with it. And that happened to me. It came down to, I said, "Look, I'll put you on my account if you'll put me on yours." Basically, it's like, "Here's this toy, I'll take this one," you know?
Absolutely. Compromise is the name of the game.
I think the big thing is making it a discussion with them as a party to it, instead of you preaching to them or mandating.
Yes, mandating to our parents in our 50s goes over about as well as mandating to them in our teens. They're
That is
still our parents.
that is perfectly said. Yeah, that is perfectly said.
My friend Lori joined us in episode 8 to tell us the harrowing story of how one of her elderly loved ones was scammed over the phone by one of those unscrupulous professional scammers who's out to get money from the elderly. And she shared ways that we can protect our loved ones from a similar situation.
My hope is that in sharing this on your podcast today, that we can all keep a close eye on the loved ones in our lives who would potentially be ripped off by these evil people. The money stolen is literally funding things like human trafficking, the fentanyl crisis, cartels, and many other terrible things. So, would you mind if I make a public service announcement?
I would love for you to.
Okay, Gen Xers, here's my public service announcement. Please talk to your parents, your friends, and even your kids. Make sure they understand that anytime you win a real prize, the taxes are garnished. They're never expected to be paid up front. I do want to say that Publishers Clearinghouse is a real sweepstakes, but they don't call you constantly. They don't make you pay up front. They don't coax you into sending money to a personal address, and they would never extort you in any way. And you can go onto their website to check and see if, in fact, you are a winner in their sweepstakes. You would be contacted, but you won't owe anything, and you won't be hounded to send them money before your prize is even delivered. The lottery does not have a list of winners. You must buy a ticket and turn it in to claim a prize. Also, there is no prince in Nigeria who needs your help. Your bank will never, ever call or text you to confirm or validate your personal information. Social Security does not need your donations to fund them. Believe me, you donate plenty through your paycheck. And most importantly, when in doubt, go with your gut. If it feels like a scam, it probably is. You can always ask for a caller's employee number, their government ID, or tell them that you need to call them back. And then go find the number for the establishment and call them directly. If a telemarketer calls you, you can simply tell them it's a business line. They'll hang up on you. Sorry, not sorry for that one. Guys, our parents and our older loved ones are a treasure, and we must respect and care for them to maintain their dignity and honor them in what can be the hardest part of their lives. Give them grace, help them understand, and always watch their back. After all, they watched ours when we needed them to.
In episode 10, my friend Christy shared her cancer journey with us, what it was like to be diagnosed in her mid-40s with a family to take care of, and what she learned through it all. So this might be a good time to kind of go into something we talked about before we started recording, about your interactions with people during the time you had cancer. I think we all want some insight on how best to love the people who are going through something like that.
Like I was telling you before, when I would talk to my family and my friends, they were so encouraging and loving, and they were just like building me up and stuff like that. But then there was times that when I talked to them, I was feeling bad. I was feeling emotionally, physically, mentally drained, and I kept questioning, is this treatment going to work? Or is this treatment not going to work? And am I going to die? And just all these things kept going through my head, and I'd want to talk to them, and they're like, no, 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 don't think that way. And sometimes whenever whether it's cancer or if you have any kind of other health problems, those thoughts sometimes get in your head, whether you want them there or not.
Sure.
I came face to face, so to speak, with my mortality. I was like, okay, I'm not afraid to die, but I don't want to die right now. In my mind, it's not my time. God forbid if it is, then it is. I mean, you can't live in fear that you're going to die, because you're not going to live if you do that. And I kept sitting there thinking about all the things that the cancer took away from me. The very last Christmas I had with my mama, I didn't go up to their house as early as I normally would because it didn't feel good. And I left earlier than I normally would have because I didn't feel good. And I laid there and I would think about them, like, this cancer kept me from the last holiday I got to spend with my mom, not knowing it was my last holiday. And I was so angry. I told several people, I was like, I'm mad. I'm angry with God because I don't understand. And at that time, I was like, okay, I'm having a pity party. I'm feeling sorry for myself. But I'm like, why are you doing this to me? There were several times, Debbie, that I would lay there in bed and I would probably look crazy, but I would talk to him. I'm like, why are you doing this? What reason has all these events that's happened? Why? What did I do? What did my family do? Am I being punished for something? And then I called the chaplain that UT Southwestern provides, and I was telling her about this stuff, and I was telling her about my family. I'm like, they don't listen to me. My friends, they're so encouraging and so loving, and that's great. But I was like, I just want to vent.
Yeah.
And she told me, she goes, okay, Crystal, I understand you want to vent, and you have every right to. But you got to also you want them to look at it from your point of view. You need to look at it from their point of view. They want to help you and they can't. They feel like their hands are tied. They feel helpless and they're scared. And they're looking to you because you're the one that's sick. They're looking to you to lead the way.
You told me that the chaplain let you really say what you needed to say.
She did. And she told me, she goes, it is okay to be angry with God. He's got big shoulders.
Yes.
And he's going to love you regardless. And he's going to stand by you regardless. But you need to understand, he's not doing it to you. You're not being punished. He's not doing it to you. Bad things that happen in your life are not punishments for things. That's just not how it works. Everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own story, and this is yours.
In episode 12, we were joined by financial advisor Renee Butcher and my friend Lori, who introduced me to Renee. Renee offered great advice on how to build up our bank account and our retirement so that we can enjoy midlife and beyond the way we want to.
It is about discipline. It is not necessarily the math or the numbers. It is the discipline. And the reason why, if you have zero savings now at 40, 50, 60 years old, you take 1% and put it in the bank. The discipline of that, you'll start gaining traction. Mm-hmm. You'll have a sense of confidence that you're doing something. This doesn't happen overnight. You don't lift 500 pounds overnight. That's right. It's not how that works, right? We start with a 30-pound bar and fill that weight up for ourselves. So if you think of trying to get to an emergency fund built up over a course of 5 years instead of 1 year, that lessens that burden. But 5 years of a routine requires discipline and commitment. So, yes, discipline equals freedom.
I think also, as you invest and you're watching your money grow, so like you were talking about the brokerage, if you put it in there, there's a potential for it to go down. You put it in 401k, there's also a potential for it to go down. But when your work is paying off, just like when you look in the mirror and you're starting to see those muscles form, it encourages you to do more because you get that dopamine and those endorphins. You're like, heck yeah, let's go. So you get a bonus, you get, some kind of money
tax return
that shows up. Yeah, so you saved your taxes on your IRA. So what you saved, drop that in your savings too. Then it's going to grow quicker. The bigger your balance, the bigger your returns are.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and you tied in that exercise element again. And just as you said, there's some ups and downs. And as you start, anybody who's worked out or dieted, you start seeing a little bit of the result, but then you plateau and you don't know if it's working anymore and you're getting exhausted, you almost backtrack, your an injury or some life event happens, you get sick.
Yep.
It's a matter of continuing to show up. It is exercise and a workout in finances, the same way it is with our physical bodies.
Christian fiction author Drew Avenger joined us in episode 14 to tell us about his new novel, Certainty.
So the idea for the story was to follow a few people through contrasting the world's impression of certainty versus God's pure message of certainty.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the story in
Yeah,
Certainty?
so so essentially the story comes down to being about a small search engine company. We're talking about in the early 2000s when a lot of the other search engines and big companies like Google hadn't risen to the power that that they have now, and so this small search engine company is aspiring to get into social media, and they bring on people to try and box it out with the big boys and gain their part in the marketplace. And the story follows one of their employees who is comfortable with what she does, but then starts to see things as the company begins to move into social media. And so in a way, she starts to see things where the social media companies is trying to direct people's attention to certain things, and it looks suspicious. The other thing that she notices is how people who seem like they should trend toward responding to things in one way radically start trending to things in a totally different way. Like she will notice people who post things about depression and suicidal ideation and that sort of thing. But then suddenly they change and their outlook online is totally different. And she wants to investigate these things and kind of, for lack of a better word, stalk these people and see why are they different. And the thing that she finds out is that they had an experience with the Lord and had changed. And she has no idea, why such a thing could happen. So a lot of the story goes from there, and the arc of her character is based on those those odd things that she finds.
What do you intend for your audience to gain from reading this book?
So, what I hope that people would gain from this story is to, see from a different point of view and observe the impact of the pattern of the world on a specific sector of society in a relatable area of technology, and to understand how we rely on things that have significant shortcomings while overlooking where true contentment lies, and what certainty is.
In episode 16, we're joined by my friend Jennifer, a childhood friend whom I was very close with, but we lost touch in adulthood, as many of us sadly do. During the time we were apart, she went through alcoholism, a liver transplant, and a cancer diagnosis, and came out on the other side with joy in her heart and a message for all of us. And you mentioned the improvement in relationships in your life since coming through all of that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, well, and even my whole life is full and it's rich and I have hobbies. I go do things, I get out of the house, I go hang out with Twinkies, aka you. I go, do things with my friends. I go see my daughter all the time. She and I are like best friends now. We had a mother-daughter relationship, but now we have a bond that is indestructible. I'm close with my son. Christian and I talk all the time. I mean, just everything about my life is richer and it's greater and it's so much better without alcoholism, and it's so much better because of God and the things that he has done to restore what the locusts have eaten.
Mhm. I love that. I remember when we first reconnected and I picked you up at your mama's
Mhm.
house and your mom said that exact
Yep.
quote, "The Lord will restore what the locusts have eaten."
Mhm.
And I just it just gave me
Yes.
chills because that's so true in your life and your story.
Yes. Oh, yes. And things still aren't easy. They're not easy by any means because having a transplant is a marathon. It's not a sprint. I thought it was a sprint at first, but I have learned, and God teaches me the patience, and he teaches me that his timing is perfect and that his will is perfect. Everything about his plans for my life, if I just listen to him and just follow what he desires for me, uh, everything falls into place. And I am a happy, well rounded, Jesus loving diagnostician, just mama, friend, daughter, wife. Well, gonna be wife someday. I am just, my whole life is better because of him. And you know what? I would do it all again.
Now that is saying something.
From diagnosis to transplant to cancer therapy, every single piece of it I would do again because you know what? What I go through and being able to give God the glory for this and being able to have the peace that God meant for me to have because of this is something that, is a testimony that could help somebody else someday, somewhere down the road. That, you know what? It's okay to be an alcoholic. Tell the world you're an alcoholic. It's fine. I'll scream it from the rooftop because we do recover. And you know why we recover? Because of God's grace.
That is my favorite thing in the world to hear. You know that I've said it to you off,
Yep.
like just between the two of us. I've said, like, I
Mhm.
feel so bad that I wasn't there when you were going through all of these things, that we had drifted. I'm so glad we're together now and that we get to do things like when you do have to go in the hospital for a little bit, we have an
Mm.
opportunity to have hospital slumber parties and stuff. I get to be there
Yeah,
now,
those
but
are so fun. I would have hid it from you.
the alcoholism,
I would have hid that, and I would have done everything I could to hide how bad it was until God had me open up. But there would have been a lot of times, I would try to hide. But, God had me go through this also by myself because He knew that I needed to learn to depend on Him, to count on Him, not another human, not another person, because I'd counted on people most of my life, a lot of whom let me down, but a lot of whom didn't. But he needed to be the center of my attention, and he needed for me to learn how to rely on him.
my friend Rod joined us in episode 18 to tell us about his experience with changing careers in midlife. He went from being a welder fabricator to working in stocks and securities. That's a big shift. He also offered some pretty great advice.
First of all, if you are working a job or a position or whatever you want to call it, where you know that's not what you want to do all your life, do not
Mm-hmm.
get yourself in a financial situation where you can't change.
Ooh, that's good.
Okay? Because if you are miserable at your job, your family is miserable because you're miserable at your job, your kids are going to be vying for your time or your affection because you're dissatisfied at your job. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I know lots of people that are, well, I can't change. If I go do something I love, it's not going to pay me as much as I'm making here. So I'm, basically stuck doing this because I've got all these obligations that I have done to myself. Um,
Oh, that's
so
good advice.
we need to learn at a young age how to live on less than what we make. So we've always got a buffer for bad times. Having the two incomes is nice. It makes a buffer, but it's the same theory no matter where the income comes from. You should always live on less than what you make. And that way you've got something put back to take care of those unexpected things. The $1,000 deductible on the car insurance, when you run into somebody or your kid does, or whatever. But, you know, yeah, unexpected things that we can't plan for come up all the time. So that's the first advice, is to make yourself in a position where you can change.
Mm-hmm.
And then, don't just change for dollars, change for dollars and enjoyment.
Yes.
That old saying of if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life is a flat out lie, but still, because you'll end up working 90 hours a week. But still, you want to enjoy what you do so you don't dread going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a great example to show your kids and whoever else you're influential about that, work is not part of the curse. God gave Adam the job of tending the garden before he ever sinned. So he intended for us to work right from the start. So it's not a curse. How we handle it sometimes is a curse. But I think we need to train our kids as we raise them and our grandkids that, it's a blessing to be able to go to work, to earn your way and to pay for your own stuff and to have money. If you're going to make a midlife change, prepare for it the first half of your life and be ready. And whether you
Mm-hmm.
plan on a midlife change or not, that's still good advice because anytime you have extra, you've got extra. Right?
That's right.
So, anyway,
Anytime you've got extra, you've got extra. That's sage right there.
yeah,
That's
there you
good.
go. Well, it's a gray hair.
Once again, I want to give a big thank you to everyone who joined me on the podcast this season and made it what it was. I hope we see some of you back in season 2. Thank you so much to all of you who have listened for the last 20 episodes and made this so much fun. I look forward to our next time together. Until then, friend, let's keep on juggling.
Take your place. Yeah, I think we should meet in the middle. I follow you 'cause you're the light of the day. I need you like you need me, it's so simple. It's so simple.